in the story. And if you don't know that, man, where have you been? We've been doing this all year. And so we're in a cool part of the story right now. We've been talking about that we're in the kingdom era. And in the kingdom era is that part of Scripture where the judges' cycles are finally done. We have these three main guys come in. We got King Saul, we got King David, and then King Solomon. And then the kingdom divides. And then after that, they go into exile. And after that, there's silence. And after that, Jesus shows up. Okay? You with me? You good? Cool. All right. So we're in the kingdom era. We're talking about transformed lives. So we're looking at a lot of people right now and just how they interact with God and how our lives interact with these parts of the story. All right. So last week, what we did is we started this series about these kings. And we looked at King Saul. And King Saul was he was the first king of Israel, and he was an impressive guy, head and shoulders taller than everybody else, wealthy guy, came from a known family, but he had no heart for God because he had a life marked by partial obedience. And remember, we said that partial obedience is really just disobedience made to look acceptable. Right? So that's what characterized Saul, and then eventually he started to just spiral down into madness. And at that same time, God starts raising up another king who is who? David, right. And so one of the things that whenever you think about David, whenever you talk about him, there's like this key verse that always comes up about him, that David was a man after God's own heart. There you go. David was a man after God's own heart. That's kind of like his banner bio verse about himself. So today we're going to be talking about David because David had a whole heart. Saul had no heart. David had a whole heart. And then Solomon had a half heart. So we already know what it looks like to have no heart. We talked about that at length last week. And if you weren't here, you missed it, or you forgot something, we post this stuff online every week so you can catch up. But we're gonna talk about David today. And where we're going with this is the point here is that whole hearts honor God. Okay? Whole hearts honor God. When we talk about the contrast with Saul having no heart, and we talk about the contrast with David, the whole hearts honor God. All right? So, let's go ahead and pray, and let's jump into this. Daddy, we love you. We thank you for today. And God, I'm excited for just opening the Word together. God, thank you that we're here. Thank you that we're in this place, and we are touching shoulders with folks, and we're looking at your Word, and God, we anticipate and we expect that the timeless truths of your Scriptures are going to transform lives today. God, and I look forward to that, and I thank you for that. So help me be clear as I preach the word you have given to me, and I pray that you would clear minds and clear hearts to receive that. Jesus, we love you. In your name, amen. All right, so a whole heart. We are not actually there yet, but that's what we're going to be. 1 Samuel 24, 2-7 is going to be our main scripture for today. But when we talk about a whole heart, to understand what that means, we have to contrast it with what we talked about last week. Because it's easy to assume two things. It's easy to assume what no heart means. It's also easy to assume what a whole heart means. And if you get stuck in that trap of assuming that you know what a whole heart is, then you might actually be stuck in the camp of having no heart because you start to justify things, understand things a little skewed. All right, so we're going to use that as a point of contrast to help us kind of understand more well-rounded when we see David was a man after God's own heart. Okay, what the heck does that mean? And am I doing that? So that's what we're going to kind of look at today. The point of this message, the point of the story that we're going to look at and what we're going to talk about today, it's not that David never made mistakes. We all know that. It's very public. It's very famous. There's books and psalms and songs and poems and seminars and conferences written all about it. There's movies about it. There's all kinds of stuff about David's major failure. So this isn't about that David never made mistakes and Saul did, and that's why Saul had no heart and David has a whole heart. All right? So everybody in the room should be able to just go, oh, good. This isn't going to be one of those where you got to do this and don't do this and you got to be perfect. And like, you hear enough of that crap at school and in emails from teachers and principals all the time. I mean, I found out this week you guys get your grades sent to you like every day or every week. I mean, how much pressure is there to perform when that happens? It's like, oh, your grade dropped 1,000th of a percentage point. You better get in study hall. Like, that's not going to happen today. All right, when we look at the Word of God, we are not going to heap a burden upon you where suddenly you have to walk out of here thinking you're not good enough and that you got to just try harder. That is not happening because that is not gospel. All right, so there's going to be a sigh of relief in this place. There's going to be freedom for you guys at the tail end of the year when everything is so stressful and it's just like, I just want summer to get here, but then I don't want it to get here because I'm going to be working all summer, and then you never get to breathe. Well, that is the point of this ministry. This is your green pasture. This is where you come to find rest and to find food. So hopefully, after hearing the word of God today, you find that rest for your soul. And you have an understanding of what a whole heart for God is in a way that doesn't mean you have to try to outperform the next Christian in your school or in your hallway or even on your couch. This is not about performance. This isn't about not messing up. Okay? What this is that I want you guys to understand that a man or a woman after God's own heart is not someone who's perfectly pious in all scenarios. A whole heart for God doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean being extremely overly zealous, religious in everything. Sometimes you're going to stub your toe and you're probably going to say things that are 4 letters long. That's going to happen. Okay? That doesn't mean you don't have a whole heart for God. That means you're a little rough around the edges. And we'll work on that later, but that's not the main deal. All right? So understand that. It's not some burdensome requirement that we're going to give you today. Whole hearts honor God. Stick that in your memory. Whole hearts honor God. So what does that mean? Well, when we look at David, we talk about David. David has a whole heart for God. This is where we're keying in on. So even into the first century church, what they would do is Christians would look back to David as this model of spiritual leadership, a man who had a whole heart for God. And there are some examples that we can look at in his story of his godliness, not his perfection, his godliness. So 1 Samuel 16:11, this is when we first meet David. Pastors preached on this last week in worship. But David was a little runt kid. He was number 8 of 8, and he was out in the fields working with the sheep while everybody else was having a party. All right, so this kind of shows a little bit of his character right off the bat when he's a kid, is that he is working while everybody else is playing. He is diligent in the fields while everybody else is having a barbecue at home without him. And what he writes about this later in Psalm 15 when he talks about the character of a man, and one of the things he says is that he keeps his oath even when it hurts. That means your yes is yes, your no is no. It's not yes unless or no because. He keeps his oath even when it hurts. So even when his entire family is celebrating and doing this big pomp and circumstance, he's out working. He's got this diligent, resilient spirit about him where he's going to sacrifice and it's going to matter. And that shows up later in his life. 1 Samuel 17 is when he fights Goliath. And one of my favorite details of that story is David's a kid still, all right? He's probably younger than you guys at this point. When this 9-foot-tall giant has been, you know the story. But what it says, the detail that I love about it is it says David ran to the battle. He didn't kind of sit back and plot. He grabbed those stones, he grabbed the sling, and he charged. He took out running. He left the armed army behind him cowering, and he ran to the battle. That's an amazing detail of the bravery of this guy. And then in 2 Samuel 7, David has a great victory, but instead of talking about me, I love myself, I put my picture on my shelf. What he does is he acknowledges God's power and not his own. Okay, so these are just some snapshots of David. If you read his story, it's remarkable. We could spend a whole year on this guy, and I'm kind of tempted to do that when the story's over. But what we see here is that David is a contrast to King Saul, but he's a precursor to Jesus. Okay, so Jesus is the true and better David, which means that these things that David did well, Jesus did perfectly. Okay? So what I mean by that is, when I said that David kept his oath even when it hurt, and he's out tending the sheep while everyone else is partying, Jesus took that to the next level because in the garden before he was crucified, he actually prayed if there was another way other than the cross that God would send that to him. But that didn't happen, and so instead what he does is he submits himself to the point of obedience to death on the cross, even when he didn't really want to. All right? So that was one thing. David ran to the battle with Goliath. Jesus battled Satan after 40 days in the wilderness. David acknowledged God's might, but Jesus displayed it. And so the story today, as the preschool gets done reenacting some kind of assault on Mordor, I guess. The story today, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the deep integrity of this particular part because whole hearts honor God. So, Grace, I would love it if you could read 1 Samuel 24, 2 through 7 for us.
You want me to stand up?
Yeah, of course, and take mine. It's bookmarked. If you guys would turn there, if you're not already there, 1 Samuel 24, 2 through 7. And I'm pretty sure I got the right page for you this time.
Okay.
Follow along. Here we go.
So Saul took 3,000 able young men from all Israel and set out to look for David and his men near the crags. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, of the wild goats. He came to the sheep pens along the way. A cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. David and his men were far back in the cave. The men said, "This is the day the Lord spoke of when he said to you, 'I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish.'" Then David crept up unnoticed and cut off the corner of Saul's robe. Afterward, David was conscience-stricken for having cut off a corner of his robe. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lay my hand on him, for he is the anointed of the Lord." For these words David sharply rebuked his men and did not allow them to attack Saul. And Saul left the cave and went his way.
Cool. Thank you very much. All right, so this is one of my favorite stories in all of Scripture. There's so much fun to be had with this one. So we're going to just unpack it a little bit by little bit here. So what has happened, just a quick overview of what's happening here. Saul has already kind of gone mad, and he's been trying to kill David for in a number of situations. He's tried to spear him to the wall. He's been overcome with anger and jealousy, and he's pursuing David. David flees for his life, and he's out in the countryside now. And Saul is coming after him yet again. Like Saul is just, he's out for blood. And so that's where we are in this story. But the thing is, what do you notice first of all, is it says Saul took how many men with him? What's it say? 3,000, all right? So 3,000 men, that's about 5 times the size of David's army at this point. And David's army is, some guys that were just distressed and looking for leadership. These would eventually become David's mighty men. And if you've ever read that, that is an amazing group of guys. These are the ones that one went down into a snowy pit and killed a lion. One killed 600 guys by himself in a field of beans. I mean, it's just, these guys are the elite of the elite. And what happens is Saul is pursuing David and these men with 5 times the numbers. All right, now, here's another thing. Where it says they went, it says they go to the crags of the wild goats. Now, what this is a precarious place to bring a force this size. 3,000 men for a search and destroy mission is a little bit insane, especially when you see the landscape. This is kind of what it looks like, all right? This is in Getty. This is the place where this is. So if you see the people down there right here, this will just kind of give you a little bit of scope for the size of the boulders and the depth of the valley through here. So that's one. That's another picture of the landscape of this place. Just so you can see that this isn't some rolling meadow. These are plateaus in the desert with a little bit of oasis land. And then there's a cave up in the crags. That's not the cave, that's just a cave. So if you've never seen a cave before, that's what it looks like. All right, so that's kind of the landscape that's going on. All right, so just to kind of wrap your mind around this is the kind of terrain that a single SEAL team would infiltrate, not an entire brigade. Okay, so if you take 3,000 foot soldiers through this kind of terrain, there's all kinds of potential for damage and injury and destruction to Saul's own men. And he's doing this just so he can kill one guy. Now, this is where it's fun, because afterwards it says in verse 3, somebody read verse 3 for me.
He came to the sheep pens along the way, the cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. David and his men were far back in the cave. All
right. Saul went in to relieve himself. This is really fun because it's a Hebrew euphemism for to cover his feet. Now, what the heck does that mean? It means that. Saul went into the cave to sling a deuce. All right? And he went in by himself. And to cover his feet means he dropped trousers, his feet are covered, Okay, so that's one of the commentaries I read. It's so proper. It says, Saul's entering the cave alone implies he simply planned to use his privacy to relieve his bowels. So let's think about this. All right? How many of you guys have ever been in a cave before? Okay, so you'll be able to picture this and feel this and smell this and hear this and see this, right? Think about think about the posture of what Saul must have been doing. Okay, he's not going to be standing up with his sword out ready to go. His feet are covered. He's in a cave. He's wanting to be private, so he's probably not right at the entrance either, where his men can see him. So he's back a little ways. He's out of sight, and he's popping a squat right here. Okay, so that's his posture. Not really a defensible position, unless you're like a lineman or something, or a tight end or whatever. But he's squatting down, and he's completely alone, and he is completely at the mercy of his robe around his feet. So even if he was startled, what would happen? He would trip and probably fall on his own crap, right? So think about it. He is completely vulnerable in this. Now, let's think about this. That's just the posture of it. But think about the eyesight difference. Where was David and his men? Where? Where in the cave? Huh? What does it say in verse 3? Where? They were far back in the cave, right? So you guys that have been in a cave, where do you come from to get into a cave? You come from the daylight, from the brightness, and you walk into this dark hole. What happens to your eyesight in that moment? Can you see anything? Can you make out anything? Now, if you and your men are hiding far back in the darkness for a long time, are your eyes adjusted so you can see everything? And he's backlit. So just think about the strategic advantage that he would have just because of his eyesight at this point. They've been hiding in there who knows how long. Their eyes are adjusted to the darkness. They're able to see clearly. Saul is not. If he's anything like me, it's like DEFCON 5. I got to get in there and get my business done. So he's not worried about what's around him. It's just a cave. There's thousands of these things in it yet. All right, let's go back to that because the toilet thing's probably creeping out. All right, so that's the thing is he's already at a disadvantage with his eyesight as well. So you contrast those things. Think about the sound in a cave. What happens to sound in a cave? It echoes, right? All right, so you're a bunch of men. You're dudes hiding in a cave. Someone comes in to poop. What's going to happen with that sound? What's it doing? It's echoing down against. If you're a dude and you're a military guy and you hear someone rip one and it rings out in the cave, what are you trying not to do? You're trying not to laugh. That's the guy code. You go to the bathroom, there's no noise. You don't talk. You don't laugh. You don't make eye contact. You look straight up and you walk out and hope you don't touch anything. Right? Ladies, that's what we do in the bathroom. You don't make noise. So anybody that does make noise, I guarantee you some of those guys are like, and trying not to laugh and let that echo back. It's like, you don't want that if you have the strategic advantage. All right? So, but that brings me to another point, though. When you think about the sound, look at what this says in verse 4, the tail end of verse 4. Will you read that for me? Yeah, the tail end of it.
The men said, "This is the day the Lord spoke to Kahlich when he said to you, I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with it."
What's that last part say?
That David crept up unnoticed and cut off.
He crept up unnoticed. How does that happen? How do you walk in a rocky cave and you sneak up right behind somebody unnoticed? Because, you kick a rock at all, that's... How can you do that? How in the world did David creep up in a dark cave with a bunch of men behind him, probably trying not to laugh still at this point? And if he touches anything incorrectly, that's going to alert Saul to his presence. That's an amazing feat when you think about just the sense of diligence. And then think about the temperature of a cave, too. What's the temperature like in a cave? It's pretty cold, but it's pretty consistent, too. Do any of you guys like to fall asleep when you're hot? That's like the worst thing ever, right? We have sweaty sheets. And that's like my whole first summer at Kanakuk. I messed up. I took a wool sleeping bag instead of sheets. And when you're in the Ozarks in July sleeping on a wool sleeping bag, you want to die. Like even at bedtime when it drops down to like 90. Well, you don't want to fall asleep when you're hot. So this is kind of what I'm thinking, is that this scenario with Saul, he comes in, he falls asleep after he does his business. Because it's cool, it's a restful place, he's finally quiet, he gets a moment to himself, but he has no idea what's happening behind him. So then when we talk about this next part where it says that David cut off the corner of Saul's robe, first, this picture cracked me up when I Googled this. It's just funny, man. You don't see that on many t-shirts. But anyway, this is more a picture of like Saul's robe. As the king of Israel, Saul would have this robe that was distinguished from the other men. Okay? So he would have like either a fringe on it or a certain design that was etched into the bottom or like a certain dye or something. It's something that would set him apart. So here's just kind of a fringe. It's pretty ornate. And that's what the king would be wearing. So for David to do this, he's what's he doing? He's working. When the language says it cut off the corner of his robe, it's the same kind of language that they used for like divorces back in the day, or like a diplomacy, like a breaking of a treaty. So like the robe was like in a husband-wife relationship, a robe would be like, I would bring my wife under my cover, under my care. So in a divorce proceeding, it would be like, I cut that off. She is no longer part of this. Or if you have an alliance with somebody or another king, it's like, I'm going to cut off that part of my robe. It has a symbolic way to say we are no longer allies here. So it's a very legal kind of thing, a legal distinction. And so for David to do that, what he's doing is he has this decision to make. I can either take his life or I can take his identity. So, just flash poll real quick. What do you fear more? Do you fear death or public speaking? If you fear death more, raise your hand. If you fear public speaking more, raise your hand. And some of you didn't vote because you're afraid to speak out publicly. That's the thing, it's like statistically, nationwide, people are more afraid to do this right here than to die. Like standing up in front of a crowded room of a very hostile audience, which is you guys, like just public speaking is terrifying, and we don't want to lose our identity. We don't want to say something stupid and then go viral, like, oh, you remember when that guy? We don't want that. We would rather die, some of us, than to experience that shame. So this is the kind of things that David he's chosen to take his identity instead. Commentary says David takes a portion of Saul's garment rather than his life. Though it looks more merciful at first, we learn immediately that David is conscience-stricken by his deed. The fact that he immediately regrets this violation of Saul's robe strongly suggests that his initial motivation was not so high-minded and differed only in degree from the more primitive stirrings in his men. What were his men encouraging him to do? Kill him. This has been promised. God said he will deliver the kingdom into your hands. This is your moment. Do it. Do something about it, and do it in obedience. But he goes up and he cuts off the robe, not to spare his life, but really to kind of destroy his reputation, to show, I'm the king. See what I just did? But we see that he's immediately conscience-stricken. Now, conscience-stricken, it's really cool word image here, that if you probe a little bit into what that means, it's basically that his heart was punching him. After he did this, his heart was punching him. In modern English, we might say, like, I'm kicking myself for that. You ever said that or felt that or heard that? You do something and then immediately like, oh gosh, I just kicked myself for that. That's what David is going through at this moment as he does this, and then right afterwards his heart starts punching him in the soul, and he's like, oh, what have I done? And that's what sin will do to a whole heart. It's going to bother us. It is going to mess with us. It is going to make us unsettled. When we have those moments of weakness or where we give in to temptation, there is something that stirs, maybe even just a little bit, inside our heart where we're just like, ah. At least that's what it should do. And that's one of the ways you can know the condition of your heart. If you have a whole heart, sin should bother you. It should mess with you. It should make you unsettled. It should make you feel uncomfortable. It should make you want to respond in repentance and restoration. And that's what David is marked by. Remember, we said he's not one that doesn't ever mess up. Look at the Psalms. Man, there's so much good stuff in there about repentance. And that's straight from the heart of David. So David, he'll eventually have the throne. It's been promised. He's been anointed king. It will be his. But it's going to be as a gift of God rather than his grasping and maneuvering. See, whole hearts honor God. And for us, that means aligning ourselves more with what Psalm 52 says. It says this: I cry out to God Most High, to God who vindicates me. Catch that. I cry out to God Most High, to God who vindicates me. God is the one who will act on your behalf. He sends from heaven and saves you, rebuking those who hotly pursue me. God sends forth his love and his faithfulness. So I want to wrap up by looking at 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 15 through 17. Go ahead and turn there. 1 Peter 2, 15 through 17. That's towards the back of the New Testament. It's one of the skinnier ones. If you have a Journey Bible and you find it, let us know what page that is. 1 Peter 2, 15 through 17.
It's like 16:12.
16:12. All right. First Peter 2, 15 through 17. I think this ties in really well with a way to wrap this up. It says, for it's God's will that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. Live as free people, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as God's slaves. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the family of believers. Fear God. Honor the king. So when you break this down, verse 15, for it's God's will that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. And you see this later in David's story when he actually comes out of the cave and confronts Saul about this. That his integrity stands in the midst of all this chaos and pursuit and wickedness. His integrity shines really brightly. Whole hearts prefer integrity. I wonder if your heart leans this way. Verse 16, live as free people, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as God's slaves. See, David was the new anointed king. It was already established. The throne will be yours someday. But he didn't use that freedom to justify killing Saul. Whole hearts find joy in the good news of Jesus. I wonder if your heart feels this way. Verse 17 says, show proper respect to everyone, love the family of believers, fear God, honor the king. This is whole heart living, where it's marked by respect and community and reverence and honor. Whole hearts don't want part of this list. They want the whole thing. So I wonder what your heart wants. I wonder what mine wants. When we sit down and really evaluate, do I have a whole heart for God? It's not about perfection. It's about honor. It's about honoring God. It's about desiring the things of God. It's about integrity. It's about loving the Lord with all your heart and not leaning on your own understanding. It's whole hearts honor God. Let's pray.